Let's go back to April 1945. On a small island called Okinawa, the entire rulebook of war was about to be torn up and rewritten. And it all happened in the dark. For 40 years, one army had turned the night into its own personal hunting ground, a place where they were the absolute undisputed kings. But then, in just a few days, that incredible advantage wasn't just erased, it was flipped on its head and used against them with a terrifying new weapon. This was a piece of top-secret tech so revolutionary it was almost like magic. So let's talk about how a secret light didn't just conquer the darkness, it changed how we fight forever.
Just stop and really try to put yourself on the shoes of the soldier who wrote this. You're an officer in the Imperial Japanese Army, probably huddled down in some muddy foxhole on a night with no moon. Your whole life, your whole military's philosophy is built on one simple truth. The night belongs to you. It's the place where a warrior's spirit and skill can beat an enemy's bigger guns and more powerful machines. But tonight, that truth is falling apart. Your best men, the ones who could sneak through enemy lines like ghosts, are being picked off one by one by an enemy they can't see. There are no flares, no searchlights, just the crack of a rifle coming from somewhere out there in the pitch black. This diary entry, it's not just a report. It's a confession. A confession that his entire world has been turned upside down. A world where his greatest strength has suddenly become his biggest weakness.
Now, to really get why this was such a profound shock on Okinawa, we have to understand just how completely the Japanese army owned the night. This wasn't just some clever tactic they developed. No, this was at the very core of their identity as a fighting force, something they had been perfecting for decades, all the way back to their war with Russia in 1904, a war they won, by the way, with huge, daring attacks at night. For them, darkness wasn't something to be afraid of. It was a weapon. It was a sanctuary. And that sanctuary was about to be breached in the most brutal way imaginable. And right here, you see two totally different realities just smashing into each other. On one side, you have the official Japanese doctrine, their belief system. At night, technology doesn't matter. What matters is the warrior's spirit, their will, their intense training. But then you have the other side, the raw, terrified accounts from American Marines. Listen to that again. They came at night like ghosts. These guys weren't fighting other soldiers. They were fighting phantoms in the dark, shooting at every snapped twig, every shadow that moved. For Japan, this wasn't just a tactical edge. It was a powerful psychological weapon. And that fear? It was backed up by cold, hard numbers. Before the invasion of Okinawa, the U.S. Army did an analysis and found that a staggering 60% of all American combat casualties were happening at night. Just let that sink in. The majority of the bleeding, the dying, it was all happening after the sun went down, in the domain where Japan was the absolute master. Mathematically, the darkness was their hunting ground. So how did they get so good? Well, their training was the stuff of nightmares. It was brutal and incredibly meticulous. Soldiers would spend months training blindfolded, learning how to take their rifles apart and put them back together again purely by feel, over and over until their hands knew every single piece. They learned how to move through the jungle without making a sound, communicating with taps and touches. And maybe most incredible of all, their hearing was trained to a razor's edge. They could tell the difference between the sound of an American M1 Garand and a Browning automatic rifle from 50 yards away in the dark. They didn't just fight in the night, they became part of it. So the American solution to this terrifying problem wasn't going to be more training. It was obvious they couldn't beat the Japanese at their own game. So they decided to change the game completely. The answer wasn't born on a training field. It was born in a lab. It was a top-secret project, a huge gamble to create a weapon that could literally let you see in the dark. Project T3, the sniper scope. The technology behind it was called active infrared, and the idea was just devastatingly brilliant. Imagine you have a special kind of flashlight, but instead of normal light, it shoots out a powerful beam of infrared light, something the human eye can't see at all. Now imagine you have a special scope that can see that invisible light. To you, looking through that scope, the whole battlefield is lit up bright as day. But to your enemy, there's nothing, just pure, absolute darkness. You see them, they can't see you. It's the ultimate unfair fight. The whole weapon system really had three key parts. First, you had the spotlight, that invisible flashlight mounted right on a standard M3 carbine. Second was the scope itself, with a brand new piece of tech called an image intensifier tube that turned that invisible infrared light into that eerie, ghostly green picture we all know today. And third, well, you had to power it all, and that meant lugging around a heavy lead-acid battery, basically a small car battery, in a backpack. And that battery gets us to the big catch. This incredible, almost supernatural power came with a serious downside. The whole setup, the gun, the scope, the light, and that big, heavy battery pack weighed in at almost 30 pounds. This was not a weapon for running and gunning. The guys who used it basically became human turrets, trading their mobility for the godlike power to see in the dark.
But here's the payoff for lugging all that gear around. The effective range was over 70 yards. Think about that for a second. In total pitch-black darkness with no moon in the sky, an American soldier could now accurately hit a target from almost the length of a football field away. Before this, fighting at night happened up close and personal, at the range of a grenade or a bayonet. This technology didn't just make them better at night fighting, it made everything that came before it totally obsolete.
And the place where this revolutionary weapon would get its first test was the final, bloodiest battle of the Pacific War, Okinawa. In early April 1945, a very small number of these top-secret systems, only about 150 of them in total, were quietly handed out to frontline units. The Japanese soldiers, totally confident after 40 years of mastering the darkness, got ready for their usual nightly attacks, with no idea that their oldest and most trusted ally was about to betray them.
The effect was immediate, and it was absolutely catastrophic. April 1st, the scopes are handed out. The very next night, April 2nd, the first Japanese attacks are just cut to pieces by what must have seemed like magic. By April 5th, there's widespread confusion in the Japanese lines, and by April 8th, that's just 1 week after the landings, their entire doctrine of night combat, something they had spent 4 decades perfecting, had completely collapsed. We're talking about elite, battle-hardened units now refusing to come out of their caves after dark. This quote from Technical Sergeant John Murray, one of the very first guys to use one of these, gives us a really chilling look at what this new kind of fighting was actually like. Through his scope, Japanese soldiers just showed up as glowing, bright green figures. He could see their faces, what they were carrying, everything. They were moving with the confidence of men who thought they were completely invisible, stalking forward to kill. And then the Americans would just open fire. You can only imagine the pure terror and confusion as soldiers just started dropping around them, killed by an enemy they couldn't see or hear.
And the impact on the battlefield was statistically just insane. During that first week of fighting, these few infrared scopes, which were less than 1% of all American small arms on the island, were responsible for an estimated 30% of all Japanese soldiers killed at night. Let me say that again. A tiny handful of weapons caused nearly a third of all the enemy's nighttime losses. The psychological damage that caused is just impossible to measure. And right here, you can hear the shock and confusion coming straight from the Japanese high command. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, a senior officer on Okinawa, writes about the total failure of his best units, and notice his exact words. Some capability we did not understand. They weren't just being outfought. They were facing something that broke their understanding of how the world worked. And that fear, it spread like a plague. Soon, Japanese soldiers all over the island were terrified to move at night, even in places where there weren't any scopes. The idea of being seen was now just as powerful as the weapon itself. What happened on Okinawa was way more than just a tactical victory. It was the beginning of a whole new age of warfare. That strange, green-tinted image in a primitive scope, that was the first glimpse into the future of the modern battlefield, a future that would be dominated not by fighting spirit, but by technology and information. You can draw a perfectly straight line from that clunky 30-pound device on Okinawa to the sophisticated night vision goggles soldiers use today. That first-generation active infrared was powerful, but it had a big weakness. Its invisible spotlight could be seen by an enemy who also had an infrared scope. So by the 1960s, Starlight scopes came along. These were passive, meaning they didn't need a spotlight. They just amplified the tiny bits of light from the moon and stars. And today, we have thermal imaging that sees heat and digital systems that combine everything, basically turning night into day. That massive advantage that first appeared on Okinawa has only gotten wider. This table really sums up the whole paradigm shift. Before Okinawa, the night belonged to the most skilled warrior. Darkness was a place you could use to hide. After Okinawa, the night belongs to whoever has the better tech. Darkness is no longer a hiding spot, it's just another piece of the battlefield to be controlled. The fundamental rule was rewritten. It wasn't about superior training winning the night anymore. It was now about superior information winning the night. The power to see without being seen was now the ultimate weapon. And this became the central lesson, a mantra that has shaped American military thinking for almost 80 years now. From the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, the power to operate and win in the dark has been one of the defining features of modern military strength. A revolution that started with just 150 crude devices has been shaping conflicts around the globe ever since.
Now, there's no question the sniper scope saved a huge number of American lives by completely neutralizing Japan's deadliest tactic. But it also created a new kind of war, one so one-sided that some of the soldiers using it said they felt less like they were in a fight and more like they were just exterminators. This technology raised some really deep questions that we are still trying to answer today, in an age of drones and remote warfare. It forces us to ask, at what point does a technological advantage get so big that it changes the very definition of a battle? That's a question that was born in the darkness on Okinawa, and the answer is still shaping our world.